Who was the silent janitor no one ever spoke to? For nearly 30 years, he mopped floors and disappeared before sunrise. He had no friends, no family, and no history until the day a letter arrived. Inside, a shocking gift and one quiet request. And by the end, the entire university realized they never truly saw him. Stay with us to learn why he left $8 million behind and what he asked for in return. Don't forget to subscribe. On the campus of Haver University, there was a man most students didn't notice until he was already gone. His name was Walter Green. He had worked the night shift as a janitor for nearly 27 years. Every evening, as lecture halls emptied and corridors grew quiet, he appeared, always in the same faded gray uniform, always pushing the same cart with a squeaky wheel. His ID badge had long since lost its shine, and the lettering had faded to near illegibility. Still, he wore it every night. Walter moved through the building like part of its structure, slow, methodical, silent. Students and faculty alike knew him, not by face, but by routine. The soft clatter of mop handles, the rhythmic creak of his cart, and the faint scent of lemon cleaner that lingered in freshly polished rooms. He cleaned every corner of the East Academic Wing, from the lecture halls to the faculty restrooms, without ever drawing attention to himself. He rarely, if ever, used the staff kitchen. He never stayed in the break room. No one could recall a time he had eaten lunch in public. In elevators, he kept his head down. In meetings, he was a blank space in the attendance sheet, technically there but unnoticed. Even the security guards who worked the same hours said they'd gotten used to his presence, like they would a light left on or a door that never quite shut right. He didn't speak much, and when he did, it was usually a nod or a brief word, barely audible. Over the years, professors came and went, students graduated and disappeared, but Walter remained, always present, always punctual, always at a distance. His schedule never changed. His route never varied, and in all that time, no one could say they truly knew who he was or where he went when the sun came up. When the dean of Haver University retired, the event was marked with quiet ceremony and formality. The faculty gathered in the main conference hall dressed in their finest. A catered spread lined the tables, and a jazz quartet played softly near the windows. Colleagues offered speeches filled with anecdotes and polite laughter. At the end, the outgoing dean was presented with a commemorative plaque, a bouquet of deep red tulips, and a miniature bronze model of the administrative building with his name engraved at its base. Walter Green wasn't there. He had cleaned the dean's office every Tuesday evening for the past 20 years. The carpeting in that room was always spotless, the window blinds always aligned, the bookshelves always dust-free, but no one thought to ask if the janitor might want to attend. His absence didn't raise eyebrows, it simply wasn't noticed. Outside the reception hall in one of the East Wing corridors, his cleaning cart stood still. It rested against the beige-painted wall between lecture rooms, A113 and A115. The mop handle leaned at a soft angle, and the wheels left faint scuff marks on the linoleum. The cart had never been left there before, and it stayed that way for the entire day. It was the university's payroll office that first flagged something unusual. Walter's last paycheck hadn't been claimed. Direct deposit was never arranged. He preferred checks. But this one sat untouched in a manila envelope on the third shelf of the filing cabinet marked WG. Calls went unanswered. A letter sent to his listed address was returned unopened. 7 days later, a typed notice arrived from the county records office. Walter Green had died. No obituary, no memorial. The cause of death was not disclosed. The listed date was January 15th. He was 73 years old. There was no emergency contact, no next of kin, no request for university acknowledgement. His name was quietly removed from the schedule. A new janitor was assigned to the East Academic Wing. The cart was stored in the back room without a word. And just like that, Walter was gone. Without noise, without ceremony, without anyone truly realizing what they had lost. Nearly 2 months after Walter Green's death, a yellow envelope arrived at the university's administrative office. It was thick, sealed with an official-looking sticker, and bore a small embossed crest in one corner, a symbol belonging to a regional law firm in nearby Westmore. The receptionist placed it in the campus mail tray without ceremony, unaware of its contents or weight. Later that afternoon, the envelope made its way to the university's general counsel. Inside was a neatly folded cover letter, a notarized document, and a smaller sealed envelope addressed to the university board. The paper smelled faintly of archival dust and something older, perhaps disuse or time itself. The lawyer read it twice before calling anyone. The first line alone was enough to still the room. "If you're reading this, then I've truly gone. Don't be alarmed. I simply want my money to return to the place where I once believed I belonged." The letter was signed in firm, steady handwriting. Walter J. Green. Attached was a legally binding will. In it, Walter designated Haver University as the sole beneficiary of his estate. The total sum listed was $8,231,104. The figure had been reviewed, confirmed, and certified by an external fiduciary authority. The funds had accumulated over decades in a well-managed investment portfolio under his name. The record showed he had begun deposits in 1984. The room where the letter was read fell into silence. The idea was impossible. This was Walter, the janitor who barely spoke, who pushed his cart alone through the halls long after lights had dimmed. How could he have amassed a fortune? There had been no sign of wealth. He lived in a modest single-room rental. No car, no family, no outward luxury. Speculation started immediately. Faculty whispered, staff turned to old photos and wondered aloud, but the paperwork was real. The bank confirmed the transfer. The will had been filed and validated. There were no loopholes, no conditions, no disputes. Just a quiet decision made by a man no one had taken the time to understand. And so the university found itself in possession of over $8 million, left by a man who, for most of them, had simply been part of the building. In the quiet unraveling of Walter Green's story, details emerged like scattered pages rediscovered in a forgotten archive. He had served in the U.S. Navy, not as a decorated officer, but as a logistics clerk stationed primarily on supply ships in the Pacific. His service, while honorable, was unremarkable on paper. He didn't speak of it. There were no photos, no medals on the wall, no bumper sticker on an old car. It was simply a chapter he had turned and quietly filed away. After the Navy, Walter didn't return to a family home. There wasn't one. He settled briefly in various cities across the state, picking up jobs that didn't ask questions: construction laborer, warehouse night shift, groundskeeping. He moved often, signed month-to-month leases, left when rents increased or owners changed. His name appeared in public records, but never twice in the same place for more than a year or two. He didn't seem to build a life so much as maintain a quiet existence. Then, in a faded strip of microfilm buried in the Haver University Registrar's archive, an old enrollment form surfaced. Walter J. Green had once been a student there. The form was dated 1975. His declared major, mathematics. According to financial records, he made his first tuition payment in cash. He completed 2 full semesters and dropped out in the third. The reason given was brief and heartbreaking: insufficient funds. He never petitioned to return. He simply disappeared from the rolls. A decade later, his name returned to the university, this time not in admissions, but in HR files. He applied for a janitorial position. No degree, no references, just a consistent work history and a clean background. He requested the night shift specifically, citing comfort with working alone. He was hired without much discussion. The pay was modest, the job was thankless, and yet he stayed for 30 years. During that time, Walter developed habits that, in retrospect, seemed far more deliberate than anyone realized. Every evening after finishing his initial rounds, he would take a long break in the university library. While the rest of the campus emptied out and lights dimmed, Walter would sit in the economics section with a legal pad and a ballpoint pen. He rarely drew attention to himself. He read slowly, carefully, often revisiting the same titles multiple times over the years: foundational texts on market behavior, books on compound interest, biographies of conservative investors. He never took books home, but the librarians began to expect him. No one thought much of it. Some assumed he was simply killing time. Others thought he enjoyed the air conditioning. But Walter was studying, not as a student with deadlines or grades, but as a man determined to master a language the world had once told him he didn't deserve to speak. Each month, he withdrew a fixed portion of his paycheck, usually less than most students spent on coffee. He opened a brokerage account with a regional firm and began purchasing stocks in sectors he considered reliable: railroads, utility companies, industrial equipment manufacturers. He avoided trends. He ignored hype. He focused on long-term dividends, reinvested them patiently, and never once touched the principal. He lived on almost nothing. His apartment was a one-room unit above a hardware store with no television and a mattress on the floor. He cooked simple meals on a single electric burner. His only indulgence, according to his bank statements, was a small donation he made every December to the city's public library fund. Over time, the investments grew. What began as a few $100s snowballed through decades of quiet discipline. He never told anyone, not even the university accountant, who once offered him retirement counseling. He declined politely and changed the subject. No one pressed further. Looking back, those who worked near him realized how completely invisible his efforts had been. He never wore a watch, never drove a car newer than 20 years old, and never spoke of the future. But every night, in the soft glow of a library desk lamp, he was building one, just not for himself. In a will that had stunned an entire institution, Walter Green made only one request. It was written not in legal terminology but in his own hand, tucked into a folded page at the end of the formal documents. The ink was slightly faded, the lines carefully written in block letters. There were no flourishes, no dramatic language, just a simple instruction. No buildings, no plaques, no grand gestures. He didn't want his name carved into stone or etched into glass. He didn't want a bench or a statue or a scholarship with fanfare. He wanted something else. He asked that the university use the money to help students who felt like they didn't belong, specifically 3 each year. Not the top of the class, not the brightest or the most connected, but the ones who hesitated when they walked into a lecture hall. The ones who sat in the back row and wondered if the admissions office had made a mistake. The ones who carried doubt like a second skin. He wanted those students to know that someone had once felt the same way. That belonging wasn't something granted, it was something earned, or perhaps quietly reclaimed. The university, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of admiration, honored the request in full. A small selection committee was formed, not of deans or high-ranking officials, but of faculty and staff who worked directly with first-year students. Each spring, they read letters submitted anonymously by applicants who described, in their own words, why they felt out of place and why they wanted to stay anyway. There were no grade requirements, no financial means tests, just truth, vulnerability, and effort. The 3 chosen students each received enough financial support to cover a full year's tuition, books, housing, and meals. The scholarship came with a single note, a printed card that read, "From the G, Fund." Nothing more. No press release was ever issued. The endowment didn't appear in promotional materials. When asked what the G stood for, university officials shrugged or said it was confidential. But those who had worked at Haver long enough knew. They remembered the quiet man who used to walk the halls at night, the one with the squeaky cart, the one no one thought twice about. They understood that the G wasn't about glory or gratitude. It was about grace, the quiet kind, the kind that moves without applause and settles into place like dust on a windowsill, unnoticed but present all the same. And so, every year, without ceremony or fanfare, 3 students found out that they mattered. Not because of their achievements, but because someone who had once felt invisible decided they shouldn't have to feel that way too. The office Walter cleaned every Tuesday evening remained empty long after he was gone. It wasn't formally locked or closed off, and yet no one moved into it. Department chairs rotated, offices were reassigned, but somehow that small, narrow room on the 2nd floor of the East Hall was always left out of the plans. It wasn't forgotten. It simply never came up in conversation when space was discussed. When suggestions were made, someone always quietly redirected the conversation. Over time, the university stopped trying to assign it. Inside, the room was unremarkable. A single desk, a filing cabinet, 2 chairs, and a dusty window that overlooked the west side of campus. The carpet had dulled with age, and the lighting fixture buzzed faintly when turned on. But the space felt oddly preserved, as though it resisted occupation. No renovations were scheduled, no cleaning crew reassigned. It was listed on the floor plan but never touched. On the inside of the door, just beneath the coat hook, a small strip of yellowed masking tape still clung to the wood. No one had removed it, though several people had noticed it. Written across it in faint, even script were 8 words, "Leave it better than you found it." The handwriting was careful, the kind that came from someone used to making things last. The tape had frayed at the corners, and the ink had faded slightly, but the message remained legible. It had likely been there for years, possibly decades. Some assumed it was a forgotten motivational note. Others thought it might have been left by a former professor. But those who knew the building's past understood. Walter had written it, not for anyone in particular, just for the space itself. Each morning, as students walked by on their way to lectures, a few would glance sideways through the narrow window in the office door. Sometimes when the sunlight hit just right, there was a shimmer across the linoleum floor, like a trail left behind by a mop still wet. It caught the light and vanished just as quickly. Some claimed they felt a presence, nothing dramatic, just the sense that the room was not entirely still. A shift in air, the faintest creak, the soft echo of something moved and returned to its place. Janitors assigned to the floor reported nothing unusual, though a few admitted they never quite liked cleaning near that room at night. In time, the office became a quiet legend among the faculty and staff. A place of reverence, not superstition. No plaque marked its door. No story was told aloud. But everyone seemed to treat it with a kind of quiet respect, like an unspoken agreement not to disturb what had settled there. And so it remained, a small room with no occupant, a single message on the door, and the lingering sense that someone still walked those floors, just after the lights dimmed and before the world turned noisy again.